Hey folks, just let me know that you can hear me, please. Put a 1 in the chat. Thank you everyone for joining. Just put a 1 in the chat, please. How's everyone doing today? Happy Friday. We're halfway through August. Can you believe it? Can you believe we are halfway through August? Year is just going by. So just so you know, this is going to be a special standalone podcast. I'm doing today's main podcast much later. I just felt that this deserved its own particular discussion because there's a lot to say. I don't know about you, but I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. Thank you so much, Church Ali, for sharing the link to my travel channel. I'm actually going to start uploading again on my travel channel next week, and I've got a lot to say, especially about my situation as I try to create a second base and a second home outside of the UK. So if you want to hear about what I have to say about that, definitely subscribe to my travel channel as well. And what has unfolded in the last 24 hours is unfortunately part of that reason. Now, obviously, I haven't been in the UK since last November, so certain stories come up on my feed, and I tend to just try to ignore them for the most part, if I'm honest. And this Jason Arday story had come up on my feed a few times, but I kind of just scrolled past because I was like, oh, another person of color, another Black person entering an elite spaces and presumably doing well, and the media are just attacking them. Just another story that we've heard a million freaking times. So being that I'm not in the UK and haven't been for almost coming to a year, I would just kind of see this Jason Arday story and scroll past because I was just like, same thing, right? And then today I see the news that he has been found deceased. The exact reasoning, hasn't 100% been confirmed, but the general assumption is that he has taken his own life, and that the abuse from the British tabloid media and establishment just got way too much. Now, his family have just issued a statement that said Jason was subject to a campaign of sustained abuse for more than 3 years since he accepted the role of professor at Cambridge University by those who would leave no stone unturned in their quest to undermine him. And there was one particular professor, another one, who was effectively a eugenicist, said that, Black people weren't that smart and all of this kind of stuff, who kind of set off this whole chain of events and went out of his way to undermine Jason Arday's work in a way that you have just not seen and you don't see them do with white academics, even those accused of plagiarism or a myriad of other things. And it's the disparity between the treatment of Jason Arday and other academics who have been accused of plagiarism, the way in which the tabloid media has gone after him. And I'm going to show you the extent to which, because it is remarkable. Shout out to News Corp that actually did a whole investigation on this. And it's very, very similar. The parallels between this and the treatment of Meghan, the treatment of Caroline Flack, the treatment of Amy Winehouse, the treatment of Diana, the treatment of many others in the tabloid British press who have been attacked, exploited, used for content in a way that people who actually do very, very heinous things are not targeted. It is just unacceptable. And there's a whole culture, a whole establishment around building people up and knocking them down and giving scrutiny to those who don't deserve the level of scrutiny that they receive, and seemingly ignoring those who actually deserve the scrutiny. So I'm going to read this magnificent report from News Corp, and we're going to also discuss some other things. I did also write a Substack article about this. I'll try to get the link in the chat for you if you'd like to go and read that. But this is just very, very tragic. I'm so sorry to his family. And the other thing that is so worrying about this is that this level of scrutiny is no longer now subject to just celebrities. You can literally be anyone, especially if you become a symbol. And I think for Jason, he had become a symbol of Black excellence and representation, and that was bothering a lot of people. And that's my Substack article in the chat. And once you become a symbol, you are then subject to a level of symbolic annihilation. This was a term that Sophia Noble, who was the author of, oh god, what was her book? Is it Machines of Oppression? Algorithms of Oppression. Sorry, Algorithms of Oppression, and how AI is also playing into all of this. So she used the term symbolic annihilation in the Harry and Meghan documentary, where when you become a symbol of something, especially in this political zeitgeist, the zeitgeist then wants to make an example, or part of the zeitgeist then wants to make an example of you. And in this case, we're talking about the more right-leaning parts of the press, of the establishment. And then you then have what's often referred to as stochastic terrorism, where you have this blanket coverage of someone, and some of it doesn't even make sense or isn't even necessarily to do with the original story. It's just one big, very dangerous humiliation ritual. And that's essentially what happened. I mean, literally in the last 24 hours, let me just read this out. This is from my Substack article. Perhaps nothing captures the absurdity and cruelty of the British tabloid machine better than the chronology of his final day. News Corp reports that at 3:11 p.m., the Telegraph published another story interrogating Arday's account of being non-verbal as a child. At 3:12, 1 minute later, the London Ambulance Service contacted police from his address. He was pronounced dead 3 hours later, before news of his death was public. The Times published a mocking column about him titled "Jason Arday may want to get himself a nice pair of orange trousers." Once his death became known, the article disappeared. Later that evening, the Times published his obituary. Right there, compressed into a few hours, is the entire British media cycle. Mock them while they're alive, mourn them when they are dead. This is what they wanted for Meghan. And she almost took her own life as a result. She almost took her own life also. So I'm going to read this for those of you who maybe aren't fully with the whole story. Because this from News Corp was a very well done, and you can see, you'll be able to see the parallels. So on August 5th, 2026, so just 2 weeks ago, Jason Arday resigned from Cambridge, writing that he had reached the limits of what any person should reasonably be expected to endure. On August 14th, his body was found dead at his home in Battersea. Nobody knows how he died, and this page does not claim to. It counts what he was under. Every article the national press published about him, outlet by outlet, day by day, from the first Telegraph report to the evening of his death. The numbers are, let me just get to the slide, one sec. Here you can see, so someone's put all the articles together, and we've seen this before. They did this to Meghan. I think that was it the Daily Express, something like 44 articles in 24 hours once. Let me try and find it. I think it's the last slide. Oh. I think it's this one. Okay, it's 249 articles in 22 days. 188 in the last 9 days, after the limits of what any person should reasonably be expected to endure. After he said that, 44 from one outlet alone, The Times, including their obituary. One national article for the control case. So they counted every article about Jason Arday published by the national outlets below between the 24th of July 2016, when the Telegraph brought the allegations mainstream, and roughly 10 p.m. on August 14th, 2026, the day he was found dead. And what was also really interesting is this was not a red top phenomenon. The Mirror ran 2 pieces, the Daily Star one. The BBC and Sky covered it as news at news volume. So this wasn't just like, the trashy tabloids. The pile was the market. The Times, the Telegraph, the Mail, the Spectator, the Express counted for 158 of the articles counted here. So a lot of this was legacy media. And you know what? At this point, we need to just stop looking at these media outlets as reliable. They're not. Now, the Times also ran his only major interview. And then, so the Telegraph broke this story on July 24th under the headline, Cambridge's Diversity Poster Boy in Plagiarism Row. And then they reused Diversity Poster Boy as his name in at least 8 further headlines. So please understand, when they're using these types of words, they're creating a narrative. They're not reporting the news. They're creating a narrative. And the narrative here is that diversity has gone too far, and there's no way that a person of color could be at such a high institution, and we need to knock them down a few pegs. Now, just for the record, the claims in question, there was accused overlap and lack of citation in his work, actually quite large chunks of his work. But just so we're clear, holding someone accountable is not the same as an entire media ecosystem trying to destroy them. And there is such a large disparity between the treatment of Jason Arday and, say, Rachel Reeves, a sitting politician who was accused of plagiarism, and had about a week of bad press, and then it all kind of fizzled out. And other Cambridge scholars, actually, and other scholars who have been accused of plagiarism. And and if the allegations were true, there's a lot of back and forths as to what was true, what was found. Then it is, of course, it is important that in academic spaces we uphold truth, but the treatment has to be equal between everyone, and no one else has been given this level of scrutiny in the UK I've ever seen who has been accused of plagiarism. William O'Reilly, a Cambridge professor who was found to have copied thousands of words from his students' work, was allowed to remain in his post. He was allowed to remain in his post. And he copied from his students. And you probably don't even know who William O'Reilly was. Why? Because this blanket coverage and bullying that Jason Arday faced, it wasn't given to William O'Reilly. So why was Jason Arday treated so differently from someone else who did the exact same thing in the exact same position? Jason Arday stepped down. William O'Reilly did not. He simply just said, well, the plagiarism was a product of negligence, and he kept his post. But the individual, the other controversial scholar, well, I'm not even going to call him a scholar at this point, the idiot who went after Jason Arday, did he go after William O'Reilly? Has he gone after anyone else? So the Times higher education reporter, Jack Grove, compiled a 63-page dossier. Compiled a 63-page dossier. Did he do that for William O'Reilly? And then, so the guy I'm talking about, Nathan Kofnes, he's the self-described race realist whose Cambridge College cut ties with him in 2024 over a blog arguing Black people would disappear from almost all high-profile positions in a meritocracy. And he published DEI fraud and cover-up at Cambridge on Substack, alleging plagiarism in Arday's thesis and papers and disputing his life story. It's like they do not want to believe at all that we have the same, the same capabilities to be in higher institution, to be in higher education, despite the fact that we often know that we have to work 10 times harder, be 10 times more qualified to get half the credit, and often be refused a seat at the table. There was a Telegraph that actually brought this whole situation from academic circles to the mainstream. They posted Cambridge's diversity poster boy in a plagiarism row. So this News Corp actually do a very, very good whole breakdown of it, like month by month, how it all happened. They also put his claims of childhood disability on trial. They went to people, they even tracked down people who knew him in primary school, tried to get information from them. And it was just so obvious that they just made him ammunition and made him like a punching bag for their own bigotry. And we're going to use him now as a symbol to go after everyone. Even Dr. Shola actually did I can't play the video because she swears in the video, but Dr. Shola, or maybe I can play at least half of it because I don't think she swears in the first half. And she talks about how, this is just the same playbook that they always use. Let me just find it so I can play what she said. But this is Dr. Scholler 5 days ago. Can I? Oh, yeah, wait. One moment, folks. It's just really, really sad. And every single day, Harry and Meghan are just vindicated. You know, this person, as saying on Twitter, Sarah Roslin reposted this. They said Britain's Prince Harry said in a rare one-to-one interview that he left royal life because the British press was destroying his mental health, and revealed he watches The Crown. Harry gave an intimate insight into his young family's new life in Los Angeles. We all know what the British press can be like, and it was destroying my mental health. There you go. I was like, this is toxic. So I did what any husband and father would do. I need to get my family out of here. And thank goodness he did, because this is exactly what they wanted for Meghan.
Jason Arday or get you people are trying to kill Jason Arday or get him killed. Because what the hell is this national circus over Jason Arday, Jason Arday, Jason Arday, Jason Arday? Did you know Jason Arday? I said, what? Did he commit a freaking crime? Does he owe you money? The only serious allegation made against him was one of plagiarism, which is unfounded. I'm all for holding people accountable, but what you're all doing is not accountability. It is public crucifixion.
Exactly. I don't know if you heard what Dr. Scholler said there. She said, what you're doing is not accountability, it is a public crucifixion. That is exactly what it is. Public crucifixion. Yes, Helen, livid as well. The Salt Path writer wasn't harassed like Jason Arday, and she committed fraud allegedly. The Salt Path writer. Oh, okay. I'm going to have to look into that. I don't know about that. Thank you for mentioning it. I will research it later. Okay, so I think I will read my article out, and then I think we'll call it a day for this podcast. But I just felt like I had to say something about this, because like what is this? And unfortunately, this is just one of the reasons why, amongst other things, I've just realized that I don't think I have a life in the UK. The older I get, I'm still not at a point where I can permanently leave and set up a home and somewhere else, but I'm slowly walking towards it. Half in, half out, I guess you could say. I'm half in, half out. So I'm gonna read my Substack, and then yeah, I'll leave y'all to enjoy the rest of your Friday, and then I'll be back for the main podcast of the day later. So Jason Arday is dead at 41 years old, and Britain should be deeply, deeply uncomfortable about what happened in the weeks before his death. Britain has been through this ritual too many times to pretend it does not recognize it. Someone's story. Someone becomes a story. The story becomes a scandal, and the scandal gradually expands until the original allegation is almost beside the point. Every relationship, questionable decision, childhood memory, inconsistency, and personal vulnerability becomes available for public consumption. Columnists compete to produce the most cutting line. The newspapers discover that humiliation generates excellent engagement, and the audience is invited to join in. By the way, I still haven't been able to get Notorious JTB on because he's very, very busy. But there's someone else actually in British media who you most definitely probably know, who is considering actually coming on the Duchess of Success podcast. So I am doing my absolute best to convince them. We've started talking in the Instagram DM, so just a heads up, I might actually have a big scoop coming on the podcast. The person at the center of it even tells us they are struggling. Still, nobody listens. Then something terrible happens, and almost instantaneously, the vocabulary changes. The photographs become flattering. The jokes disappear. The obituaries arrive, and newspapers rediscover words like talented, complex, beloved, and tragic. Suddenly, everyone remembers there was a human being underneath the headline. The death of Professor Jason Arday at just 41 years old should force Britain to not only confront this ritual again, but ensure it doesn't happen ever again. The cause of his death has not yet been publicly established, but it is impossible to ignore what was happening in the weeks leading up to it. Arday had resigned from Cambridge University only 9 days earlier, saying he had reached the limits of what any person should responsibly be expected to endure, and that his family has since said the campaign of misinformation had become too much for him and asked the press to stop what they described a campaign of harassment against him and his family. And we can measure what he was enduring in numbers, as I stated earlier in the podcast: 249 articles in 22 days, 188 of them appearing in the last 9. And a lot of them not even to do with the original plagiarism allegation, just humiliation. The numbers alone are astonishing, but what happened to the nature of the coverage is even more revealing. There is a big difference between holding someone accountable and setting out to destroy them. The allegations against Jason Arday may have warranted investigation, but what followed went far beyond that. His entire life, character, childhood, disability, and achievements were pulled apart in public. Other prominent people have been allowed to treat similar controversies as professional mistakes rather than totalizing judgments on their worth. The issue is not whether Arday should have been questioned, it is why his alleged wrongdoing became a license for humiliation on a scale that others have simply not faced. Soon, the Mail was calling him Professor Plagiarism. The Telegraph repeatedly described him not simply as Jason Arday, but as Cambridge's diversity poster boy. A newspaper turned his contention that some of the criticism directed at him was racially motivated into a reader poll. A psychiatrist who acknowledged that he had never met Arday, nonetheless, wrote a column on the final morning of Arday's life, proposing a psychiatric condition that might explain his behavior. It ceased to be an investigation of academic misconduct and became an excavation of a person. Perhaps nothing captures the absurdity better than the chronology of his final day. Within the matter of a few hours, the Telegraph publishing another story about Arday, the National Ambulance Service being contacted, him being pronounced dead, and another article from the Times publishing a mocking headline about him. Mock them while they're alive, mourn them while they're dead. That's the entire British media cycle. But accountability investigates wrongdoing. A pylon investigates the human being until there is nothing left that cannot be converted into content. We know there is a difference because we can look at how other cases are handled. In 2023, a Cambridge disciplinary tribunal upheld a plagiarism complaint involving historian William O'Reilly. More than 12 pages of an article published under his name had reportedly been taken almost word for word from 2 essays written by one of his students. The tribunal concluded that the plagiarism was a result of negligent, rather deliberate acts, and O'Reilly remained in his position. Where were the hundreds of articles? Where were the polls? Where were the former prime ministers offering their thoughts? Where were reporters interviewing childhood acquaintances about what sort of teenager he had been? His plagiarism remains principally an academic misconduct story. Rachel Reeves offers another contrast. In 2023, the Financial Times found more than 20 examples of unattributed material in The Woman Who Made Modern Economics, including sentences and paragraphs resembling Wikipedia, blogs, The Guardian, and other sources. Her publisher acknowledged that some material should have been rewritten and properly referenced. Reeves rejected the accusation of plagiarism and described them as mistakes. And no one in the 2 decades since the death of her late mother-in-law has endured more relentless scrutiny of the like from the British tabloids than Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex. In a 2019 interview during ITV's documentary, Harry and Meghan, An African Story, Tom Brady asked Meghan how she was coping with motherhood, marriage, and the extraordinary press attention surrounding her. Her answer became famous precisely because it sounded so ordinary. She thanked him for asking because not many people had asked her, was she okay? When Brady asked whether it would therefore be fair to say she was not really okay, Meghan answered yes. 2 years later, we discovered how serious that answer had been during her interview with Oprah Winfrey. Meghan said that while pregnant, she had reached a point where she just didn't want to be alive anymore. Britain cannot claim it was never warned. Nor can the disparity of her coverage simply be dismissed as something imagined by people sympathetic to her. The Guardian's analysis of British newspaper headlines found that 43% of sampled headlines about Meghan were negative and just 20% positive. In its equivalent sample concerning Catherine, the then Duchess of Cambridge, now Duchess of Wales, Princess of Wales, only 8% were negative, while 45% were positive, and probably just about her dresses. Even after she disclosed suicidal ideations, the brutality did not stop. In 2020, Jeremy Clarkson wrote a Sun column fantasizing about Meghan being stripped naked and publicly humiliated through the British streets. Arday and Meghan are not identical cases, but there is a striking similarity in what happened once they became symbols. Meghan ceased to simply be Meghan and became evidence of everything her critics believe was wrong with modern Britain. Arday ceased to simply be an academic facing serious allegations and evidence of everything his critics believe was wrong with diversity in universities. Once somebody becomes an avatar for a political argument, it becomes remarkably easier to forget that their avatar is in fact a human being. Caroline Flack's final months should have permanently changed the way the British media thinks about public humiliation, but it did not. In December 2019, she was charged with assault. Flack admitted striking him but pleaded not guilty to the charge she faced, while her partner did not support the prosecution. The Sun published a leaked photo of Flack's blood-covered bedroom under a front page presentation suggesting attack carnage. The image created an obvious impression of an extraordinarily bloody assault on Caroline Flack's partner. Flack's mother has since said that the blood visible in the room was in fact Caroline's, resulting from injuries she had inflicted upon herself during the crisis that night. Her partner's inquiry required no medical treatment, while Caroline spent 12 hours in hospital. Think about the cruelty contained in that transformation of events, what actually happened versus what the tabloids reported. Evidence of a woman's own mental health crisis became visual material with which to intensify the public case against her. Flack died by suicide on the 15th of February 2020. At her inquest, the coroner concluded that the certainty of prosecution and the knowledge she would face the accompanying media press publicity was central to why she took her life. And afterwards, Britain said the words it always says, be kind. There were tributes, reflections, and solemn conversations about mental health. The sneer tone vanished once the person reappeared. And I refer to this as posthumous moral laundering. Moral laundering. While someone is alive, they can be a fraud, a mess, a disgrace, an addict, a difficult woman, or a national joke. Once they die, the same media ecosystem can miraculously rediscover complexity. Death restores the humanity that coverage spent months removing. Oh, of course it does, because death is where they can make their final monetary killing. The press never made so much money in the weeks of Diana's passing. We know because there are photographers that have said it. A final picture of Prince Harry alive would be worth almost $250,000. A photographer said this. And then we see Harry and Meghan being chased through the streets of New York by paparazzi who, from what we understand, probably don't even live in New York and maybe weren't even American photographers. We still don't have 100% clarity on what happened that night. But all of the eyewitnesses said that behavior was not normal for New York paps. There's not really even such a thing as New York paps. So your unaliving is a payday for these people. And that's why they hound and harass. They want the headlines. And this conversation about Jason Arday, it will be another 2 weeks long conversation, and they will milk it. After trying to knock him down for as long as this has been going on. I wasn't even aware of how long this had been going on. I just saw it on my feed every now and again. And then to hear this today. And what's even more crazy is British culture displays extraordinary aggression towards people it decides have risen beyond their station. It's this tall poppy syndrome, while simultaneously exhibiting astonishing defense towards people already protected by wealth and hierarchy and establishment networks. Jimmy Savile is probably the most horrifying illustration of this. After his death, and mind you, there were plenty of allegations when he was alive. After his death, established that he had, sexually abused scores of people while enjoying enormous fame and institutional access. The Dame Janet Smith review found serious failures at the BBC, the good old PDF file protecting BBC, including an atmosphere in which employees were reluctant to challenge powerful figures and concerns went unreported. And this has happened so many times at the BBC. You saw it with Edward Hughes. Oh my God, there's others as well. I just can't remember their names. That music show host, is it Tim Westwood? Yeah, Tim Westwood. And then, of course, there's Prince Andrew. An entire architecture protection surrounding him. Lawyers, palace communications, institutional loyalty, social networks. Fergie's been hopping from villa to ski resort. I mean, why didn't they put as much effort into bringing down people like that? And in the coverage that Andrew did get, you had people on daytime TV saying, oh, it's just too much. Think about Andrew's mental health. Andrew is the exact type of person that they should be attacking. Andrew's the exact type of person that we don't need to be here. Someone accused, very credibly, of abuse, who was hanging around the most shady elites. We have to care about his mental health. It's just wild. It is just absolutely wild. We resent people who we see as social climbers while romanticizing people who began life at the top. And even the term social climber is often used in a derogatory manner. Why? Why is it so wrong to come from honest, humble beginnings and work your way up? What's so wrong with that? Why is that seen as worse than literally starting your life at the top? That should be celebrated. And now social media has made the whole thing infinitely more scalable. The machinery once only, associated with the tabloid media has now gone to social media. And it just makes everything so much more difficult. Because things get shared faster. Just give me a sec, folks. I'm trying to get my slides back on. See, maybe I can do this. Hang on a moment. We have to start examining this culture that continues to produce the same spectacle. Because how many times is it going to happen before we realize this needs to stop? Because a huge part of this is because of the amount of money it makes. The amount of money it makes to do pylons and hate on people, and especially when said person is a woman or a minority, person of color. We have to really look at why is it that Britain finds this type of humiliation so pleasurable? Where we build people up, knock them down, and then mourn on top of the rubble. I mean, in the case of the tabloids, they're actually dancing on top of your rubble because of the amount of money they make. This is all of this story is generating for the money for the big tabloids. And like Dr. Shola said in her Instagram reel, it's just like the blanket cover. Have you heard Jason Arday? Jason Arday? Jason Arday? I'm sure if I spoke to my mom about it, she'd be telling me the same thing. I don't know what the coverage is, because I haven't seen visually up until today the extent of the coverage. But I'm glad that I wasn't in the UK to see all of this. And all of the blanket coverage that they give things like this once they decide to target one person is not even comparable to when you have a media an establishment person who has truly done something wrong that actually affects the whole goddamn country. I mean, look at Mandelson. He was linked to Epstein, and they rushed to spin the story on his behalf. And there was even a spread of him at home, fake cooking next to his dog in the kitchen, trying to make him see, oh, he's just an average bloke. He's just an average bloke that did a silly. Accountability is supposed to establish the truth. It is not supposed to destroy the person. And with that, rest in power, Jason Arday. And unfortunately, let this just be a warning to everyone. Anybody can become the center of a story like this now. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for stopping by. Do check out the Substack article in full if you'd like to read in more detail. And yeah, it's very, very, very disheartening, very angering, but I don't know where we go from here in terms of accountability for the wider press and media, because it happens over and over and over and over and over again. And there's still no press accountability. So what has to happen at this point for there to be press accountability? Because at this point, the British tabloids have a body count. And that body count gets higher and higher and higher. What does accountability even look like now? What does it look like? People, the news of the world shut down. They didn't learn. Amy Winehouse hounded to death, had to get a paparazzi order. They didn't learn. Caroline Flack, they didn't learn. Diana, they didn't learn. I don't know. I mean, one thing's for sure is that the British people have actually stopped reading the tabloids. The tabloids are just slop. But it's very addictive slop. To, I think, people who have, when you look at the wider culture, well, you can see why some people would be so fueled, almost like the white stuff, the powdery stuff, by tabloids. It is almost like a drug, and it gives you this dopamine hit, and you can hate on someone with no other bodily effects. Like, it gives you the same hit as a drug without any of the physical effects. That's what I think essentially the tabloid media does when it creates a culture like this. That is the purpose of it. And they are basically, I believe, just feeding what is essentially a drug addiction in the tabloid reading portion of the British public. That's the way that I see it. A drug addiction that is, the baseline is bigotry, misogyny, arism, and the othering of people that don't fit into the square. Well, I call it the square of respectability. Tabloid readers, in my eyes, they're like addicts. They're not just bigots, but they're also like addicts. And this coverage, this relentless attacking of people, is their fuel. And it's like every so often, it's like they pick one person to just jump on. They did it to Anne Hathaway. They're Hathaway haters. Anne Hathaway is the most unproblematic, one of the most unproblematic women in Hollywood. But because she was the it girl at the time, everybody knew she was going to get the Oscar. They had to humble her. I bet if I go back to that same year when they were hating on Anne Hathaway for existing and breathing, there was probably like 5 other male actors or men in media who had serious allegations against them. They always have to have one who they focus on, one who they come and destroy. Anyway, that's that. Thank you for listening, folks. I will see you later. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's probably going to be a petition or something like that. I'll share it if it comes up. But at this point, something more extreme measures has to be taken. Otherwise, this will just be yet another person, sadly, taken out by the British tabloids. And come this time next year, it'll be someone else. And now it's not just celebrities. Now it can be the average person. Now it can be just a professor. So who's next? All right, folks. Enjoy the rest of your day. I will see you later. Thank you so much. Ciao.